Meanwhile, the race to the White House is becoming ever more tense as the nominees continue to exchange racially charged and personal criticisms. Yesterday in Reno, Hillary Clinton accused Donald Trump of, and I quote, reinforcing harmful stereotypes and offering a dog whistle to his most hateful supporters, end quote. She also said that Trump is essentially providing a platform to the conservative alt-right movement, which she says perpetuates hate.
There's always been a paranoid fringe in our politics, a lot of it arising from racial resentment, but it's never had the nominee of a major party stoking it, encouraging it, and giving it a national megaphone until now.
The alt-right movement is defined by the Southern Poverty Law Center as far-right ideologically. Individuals and groups with a central belief that white identity is essentially under attack. Its members also reject establishment conservatism. Trump's newly hired campaign chief executive, Steve Bannon, was the chairman of Breitbart News. Now, in the past, Bannon has called the news site a platform for the alt-right, though he denies that the movement is intrinsically racist. A 2015 profile of Bannon in Bloomberg Business Week described the man as, and I quote, the most dangerous political operative in America. Joshua Green, the author of that article and a national correspondent for Bloomberg Politics, good enough to stick around for us this morning at the CBS News Washington Bureau. And Josh, let's get right to it. And by it, I do mean the headline that accompanied that great piece of work by you, the most dangerous political operative, Steve Bannon. What was meant by that?
Well, that was a little bit tongue-in-cheek, but what was meant by it basically was that Bannon in Breitbart News has been extraordinarily dangerous to both Democrats and Republicans. I mean, my piece delineated how he intended to go after and take down Hillary Clinton. But if you look at what Breitbart News has done over the last couple of years, they've helped drive out the Republican House Speaker, John Boehner. They've made life miserable for the Republican establishment. And almost from the get-go, they were behind Donald Trump's presidential candidacy. You can really see how they have roiled the Republican Party, too.
And clearly he comes aboard alongside the GOP pollster Kellyanne Conway at a time when Donald Trump was losing ground in the polls. It is thought perhaps then, if nothing else, that Steve Bannon can help to package Donald Trump's message perhaps more effectively, keeping it provocative while somehow getting it to the mainstream. What did you make of his hiring?
Well, you know, at first blush, it's odd. Bannon has no campaign experience at all, so to put him in charge of a presidential campaign seems a little bit nuts. But on the other hand, Bannon has been an advisor to Trump, an informal advisor all along. A lot of the things that he publishes on Breitbart News, a lot of the readers are Trump supporters. And clearly Trump feels comfortable with Bannon whispering in his ear. And Bannon, at his heart, is a populist, nationalist, aggressive fighter. That's something that Trump felt he lost under Paul Manafort's direction and wanted to get back. He thinks that essentially is the key to getting back in the race. And I know Bannon's goal is going to be to try and focus Trump a little bit more on attacking Clinton and a little bit less on attacking everybody else.
And I know that you mentioned in your piece that really detailed the many acts of the life of Steve Bannon that he learned from prior goes here that for something like this to succeed, the alt-right specifically would need the mainstream media as a vessel. Is he the person then to bring that for and to Donald Trump?
Yeah, I think that's the aim. I mean, Bannon's big insight about why conservatives failed in the 1990s was that essentially they went off the deep end with all sorts of rumor and innuendo about Bill Clinton, some of the wilder conspiracy theories that got aired in Congress, and eventually that turned people off and became ineffective. So Bannon's aim has been to focus on actual, tangible things that aren't rumors, but are nonetheless damning about the Clintons, and mainly those entail foreign and corporate donations to the Clinton Foundation, some of the paid secret speeches that Clinton gave at Goldman Sachs and other banks and won't reveal. I think his belief is that if Trump were to focus his attacks more there, that they'd be more effective because they're grounded in reality. It's something we know from polls that voters are concerned about. And so that really seems to be the way for Trump to make it back into being a close race that he might have a chance to win in the fall.
And yet Hillary Clinton made no secret, even in the days leading up to yesterday's speech, that she would be lining up the alt-right movement as nothing short of a hate movement, painting it as, frankly, a roiling sea of racism. Alt-right folks might say, look, our rhetoric is merely, it's an act of freedom. It's a collective act of freedom. But what did you make of the portrait that Hillary Clinton painted yesterday?
Well, I thought it was largely an accurate portrait. If you look at her speech, she literally read headlines from Breitbart News. So it's tough to take any kind of issue with her speech. And to be frank, this was a danger for Trump all along, that the people he is associating with, the themes that he's aired as a candidate, the dog whistles, and frankly, the more explicit whistles are so alarming to the Republican establishment, essentially because they do raise up a lot of these racists and drive away moderate mainstream voters who I think are going to be appalled when they learn about some of these things, as I expect they now will after Clinton's speech.
And certainly would be a concern, and yet the Wall Street Journal pointing out that the alt-right movement is overjoyed to be in the crosshairs of the Clinton campaign right now. And I wonder if something that essentially began, whose essence really is fringe. I'm reminded of the idea of the people who liked a band when it first began, but then when it got big, it became uncool. Is there a concern perhaps within the movement itself that perhaps it can't exist in the mainstream?
It's an interesting question. I don't know if they're going to be alt-right hipsters or not, but I think the general reaction has been one of excitement because, as you said correctly, this is a fringe movement that was brought into the mainstream mainly, I would argue, by Donald Trump's presidential campaign. These were his original supporters, and they managed to knock out all the mainstream candidates and get Trump elected Republican nominee. But certainly the fact that Clinton has identified this group and raised them up to a national broader audience that wasn't aware of them is going to give them a newfound prominence that I think many of these activists are going to enjoy and revel in. It's going to make them more of a force going forward, which I think may not have been an accident from the Clinton campaign. The idea that the election could be decided over, is Trump a racist or is Trump not a racist? That's I'm sure a debate that the Clintons would be happy to have.
So then for the alt-right movement, and if you see again the hires of Steve Bannon and Kellyanne Conway as perhaps in a way the sort of diametrical opposition to one another, if then Donald Trump continues in any way what many see as a softening on the cornerstone of his campaign, his hardline stance on immigration, where does the alt-right movement go?
Well, it's not clear. I mean, Trump is caught in a dilemma between what he'd like to say and what he'd like to talk about, and his poll numbers that show he's alienated an awful lot of women and even Republicans that he's going to need to win back in order to get elected president. So I think that he feels there necessarily had to be a bit of a softening on immigration, on the idea or the charge that he's a racist, or he's just not going to be able to win over the kind of suburban moms that he needs to win over. Now, whether or not that will alienate the alt-right, I don't know. I suspect that it won't. Trump is very well versed at speaking in dog whistles. If you talk to white supremacist groups, if you talk to some of the neo-Nazis who've supported Trump, they will tell you that while he has not explicitly said, I welcome your support, they understand him to mean that he does support their ideas and he is going to propagate them. So I think that there's a certain amount of slack that the alt-right is willing to give Trump because they understand that if he's going to get into the White House, he's going to have to soften his tone a bit without maybe dropping his belief in some of their ideas.
All a part of the tenuous calculus of a campaign, again, now led in part by the most dangerous political operative, one might argue, one being you, in the country. Josh Green, as always, we very much appreciate the insights today.
It's great to be with you.